This episode, 7 things you need to know about your home and property. In this episode, the Handyman Pros are going to discuss 7 critical aspects of things about your property and your home that you absolutely need to know. We're here to help you save time, money, and aggravation, and all of these things will do those things. And it's critical that you pay attention to what we have to say. For once, it's critical. Thanks for listening to another edition of the Handyman Pros radio show, where our goal is to help save you time, money, and aggravation. This show's called 7 Things That You Absolutely Need to Know About Your Property. And I'm here with my old buddy, John. Johnny, we've been having some discussion about this. We've got stories.
We got stories. And I'll give you a story of, so today we're going to discuss, these things that you need to know about your property. And it's kind of like a, so what else, guys? We get it. Yeah. But
no, we got stories.
We got stories. One of my stories was I was building a deck at my old house.
Yep.
And lo and behold, I found out where they ran the cable line.
I was going to say. And they're done that one a couple of times.
Thank God it was right. Thank God it was only the cable line and not some electrical.
Right.
And some of these things are not going to be marked. If you call, the folks that come out and mark,
we're going to get to that, but
they weren't going to. They're going to miss some of these things. So this is why you need to understand what's what underground, what your property. So let's have it, Larry.
So let's dive into it. So I'm going to tell my story, why this topic came up. So the other day, here I am at the house, or actually I was just getting on the road, and I get a call from the wife, right? And so the wife says, there's water backing up into the shower. And I'm like, oh no, so we're on septic, right? And I'm like, all right. So I turn around, I come home, and fortunately, folks, this is one of the things you need to know. Where is your sewer or septic clean out on your house, right? So I know where mine is. I go down there, I open it up, and sure enough, the water's backing up downstream of my clean out, right? Which is, believe it or not, a good thing, because that means the clog isn't in the home, it's downstream. I happen to have all this stuff to kind of clean that stuff out. So I have this expanding bladder thing, which I'll post what that is out in a different show. But I have this bladder thing that you hook up to a hose. I put it in there, boom, I blow out the clog, and we're back in business. Long story short, it ended up being more than that. But anyway, we'll get to that in a different show. So it got me thinking about this, and we've talked about this multiple times. We're going to do it again. These are 7 things that you just you really have to know about your property, and we'll explain some of the reasons why. One of the things is your sewer clean out. The other one is, where's your water shut off, your main water shut off, where you tie into water, unless you're on a well. But if you're hooked up to any of the municipality services, where's your main water shut off, and can you get to the valve? And so I say that, and that I'm going to shoot a video, because I was up looking at mine the other day. And Johnny, guess what? Guess what's my water valve looks like?
Don't know what.
A dirt mound. You can't see anything but dirt. So
the main water.
The main water. Oh
valve, yeah, on the street. On the street.
Yep. And that you need, folks. You need to know where that is. I'm going to shoot a video showing me. Identifying where my water main is, and B, I'm going to open the lid, and I'm going to take a shovel and dig all the dirt out around the valve, because in 9 out of 10 cases of all the homes I've been to where I've had those issues, I get in underneath the valve and you can't even see the valve, because over the years dirt has settled in there, right? Have you looked at yours lately?
Yeah, mine's clean, because I just had to do it. Somebody turned the water off on me from next door. I probably told you, because our water meters are real close to my neighbor. Right next to each other. And so the guy next door that was doing the trees hit their water line. It started to leak, so he comes and he turns mine off. He thought it was theirs. I'm in the shower, with shampoo in my hair, and I'm running out there with a towel. What the hell's going on? Because the first thing I thought of is like, maybe I told the story before. Is like, holy crap, I must have broke a leak. Broke a pipe somewhere, because there's no pressure all of a sudden. Yep.
So we're not even going to talk about practical jokes you can play on your neighbors.
Oh, that's one of them. But I let me say this. So that's the main one on the street to turn off everything. Then you should have a main one inside
in your home as well. And
I have seen homes that don't have those inside, and I know I've run across this now multiple times. I can't tell you. It must be 5 times now that I can think of that people don't know where that thing is, and they said that they had a leak or they had something and they didn't know how to turn their water off. And we've talked about this before.
We've talked about it before.
Really important to know that.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate one point you just made too, John, and that is, for whatever reason, because I found the same thing. I don't know when they must. There was a point. There's not necessarily a shutoff in your home, which is to me is insane. Right. I mean, to me, that's insane. You should be able to find some place where the water line comes into the home. There should be a valve that turns the main water off in your home. But with that said, both you just said it, and I was actually going to say it. I have found homes that do not have that. And it's not a bad idea to have that, because it's generally faster to get to your basement than it is out to the street. But even still, give you a different example, John, and you'll understand this one. If you go out in your yard one day and there's a huge wet spot halfway between the street and your home, there's a possibility your water line broke. We have a story. We've told this story before, but you have a client, John, who got a $21,000 water bill or something. Anyway, yeah, he had a water main break under his garage, and it was a 3/4 inch line. And you and I did the math. It's 13 gallons a minute, folks. 13 gallons a minute. And the magic of that one is, I still want to know, he must have run, what'd we figure, like 1.5 million gallons or something?
I don't know how much. He lives on a we all live here on at least an acre, and he lives by a creek. So it could have, probably started to pour down into the creek, and he would have never known it. He
didn't know it till he got his $21,000 water bill. $21,000, folks. That's what can happen. Now, my thing with that was, I'm amazed he doesn't have a sinkhole under his garage, and perhaps he does.
That's a whole nother story.
Nother story. But I know it. I'll give a different example. In one of my rental houses, the guy was complaining he had a $250 water bill, and I was like, there's no way. A $250 water bill for what he was doing. It was like, it's almost impossible. Well, I found a wet spot in the yard, and it was right next to the house. And I dug down, and sure enough, I had a water line break in there. It happened to be polybutylene pipe, so we replaced the line. But that's one of the things. It can happen between the house, and then you have to shut the main water off. So the main water's up at the street. That's the only way you'll stop those kinds of issues. So it's really critical that you know that. Let's move on from water, because we've talked about that one before. But one of the other things that folks, you have to know, where are your property lines? So, John, how do people tell where their property lines are?
The short answer is that everybody has what's known as pins in the ground.
Yes.
The more complicated reality of it is that nobody knows where those are.
And they're hard to find.
And they're hard to find unless somebody has just done a survey. Yep. With the plat and all the other instruments that go along with that to find those things. Now, I will tell you that in my case, I didn't know where one of mine was, and they just did a survey of. Long story short, but they found my pins, and. So I went out, and I've got, once again, I use my iPhone for everything, but I have a regular GPS application on there, not, Google Maps or anything else, but a regular GPS app. Right. And I marked waypoints, and I marked all those, and I labeled them. So now I can now I know exactly where they're at.
Yeah. So we'll give a couple of resources. So Johnny's given one that's a resource that I didn't have. There's your survey. So somewhere you should, in your closing documents of your home, you should have a survey, and it should get you pretty close to where those. Actually, it should be exactly.
You're right, Larry. It is exact. The problem is that finding those pins. A lot of times, if you've been in the home for a long, long time, those things are so buried.
Yeah, they get buried. They get overgrown with dirt.
And basically, a pin is, folks. It's like a piece of rebar.
It's a piece of metal pin. And you can, one way to find them is actually use a metal detector.
You can use a metal detector.
Yeah,
but anyways, go ahead.
Anyway, there's that. The other thing is that most counties have it's called GIS, or Geographical Information Services, and that actually allows you to pull up what the county sees as what your piece of property is. Now, the other good thing about that is you can see what your neighbors are. You can kind of get an idea of how your properties are laid out. But that's usually available on your county website. I know here in the county that we live in, they have a really good system, and it gives you tax records and all that stuff. And so it's kind of another reason why you need to know about it. But you need to know about this for a couple of different reasons. One is, if you're going to do anything on your property line, you want, like, put a fence up, just for example. It's a great example, is putting a fence up. Do not encroach on somebody else's property. This can cost you thousands and thousands. My brother has this issue. The house was built in the 80s. The fence has been there since the 80s, and the neighbor comes over and goes, "Oh, your fence is on my property." This is in 2022, folks. I'm like, well, the property was built, like, you don't have eminent domain. He goes, "Yeah, I have eminent domain, but I got to go to court." And it says it's just not worth it. But long story short, he's got this pissing match, for lack of a better word, over about 6 inches of property that his neighbor's just complaining about. So you got to know where your property lines are. Tell you another example too, John, and you know this one from personal experience as well. Tree falls on the property. Who's responsible for the tree? Well, your insurance company will tell you that wherever that tree's planted is the person that's responsible for it. And if it falls on your property, they're responsible for cleaning it up, meaning your neighbor or whoever it is that owns the property next to you. So you got to,
and that's exactly. And to that point, there's also the different laws for that too.
Right.
One of the guys that came out and did a whole bunch of tree work for him, he said, "Did you know that if those roots are, your roots are growing into his yard, or his roots are growing into your yard, then you're sharing that tree." So it's all kinds of stuff that, one of these things, anyways, but you're right. That is a very tricky thing. I will say the other thing about lot line, let's say that you want to build a shed,
setbacks. Yep.
Or anything like that. You need to know, because you're going to get into this pissing match with somebody, the county, the neighbors, and it's going to cost you a whole bunch of money not to know. And you have to get clearance on a lot of these things. And even if you put a small, something in there that you don't have to go get a permit for or anything else, you need to be aware of these things. And I agree completely. And, so we live, like I said, I'll use my place for example. We live in a very heavily wooded place, and you don't see a lot of the other homes around here. I'm fortunate. I love it. But, it's easy to encroach on my neighbors without them even knowing, because nobody would even know. But in the case that you just said, if somebody at some point says, "Hey, what's this over here?" Even though I don't see it, when the leaves are up, I hate seeing that thing now when in the fall. Right. Now you're into this whole thing, what you just described.
Yeah, and even I mean, I'm just going to end it on this. Even a simple thing like if you live in like John lives in a wooded area, right? And so like, let's just, for example, say, John, that you collected your lawn clippings and you go out and pour them in the woods. Some people get really upset when you make a big pile of lawn debris on their property, even if it's only a couple inches over. So this is why these are some of the concerns. And I mean, and this just is, it's just, you know what more of it is, John? It's aggravation, right? It's just like, I'm going to avoid that aggravation. I want to have good neighbors. I want to do all that stuff. I don't want to get into a pissing match over this, that, and the other thing. And we're going to get to one that I'm actually in a pissing match with one of my neighbors over here in just a minute. So that was the first one. We talked about sewer cleanouts. I'm going to tell you need to know where either your sewer line is or your septic tank is. If you have either or, it is critical that you know where those are. You need to know where your septic tank is or where your sewer lines go to. How do you determine that? It's actually not really that difficult. One of the ways is you go in the basement, you just look where the pipe goes out or where you see the pipe going out. And probably almost 100% of the time, it's a straight line from there to the street. Because trust me, contractors don't go in. We don't like curved lines if we can help it. There'd have to be a really extraneous reason why you would make a curved line. Like, I don't know, just for that. I can't even, for that. I can't. And the other thing is they say, not to be gross, but shit flows downhill and it likes to go in a straight line. So it just works better if it's in a straight line. So that's how you determine that. Your septic tank, it's usually pretty close to the house. Now mine is not. Mine's about 40 feet from the house, and there's a reason why it's there, but I know where that line is and I know where that tank is. But you need to know for reasons that you need to know where it is. So you got to know that one. We already talked about the main water lines, but let me
also say this, Larry. Let me interrupt you there just for a second, because one of the things you've brought up before is that why you need to know where your septic tank is. It could be out in the front yard. It can be any place. And if you don't know where it's at, you can get yourself in a whole lot of trouble for, let's say that you have a party at your house and people are parking over it.
Ooh, bad news.
Right?
That's why you need to. Speaking of deck collapses, you could also have a septic tank lid collapse, and that's a shitty problem. Excuse my language.
Or the lines running out there.
Yep, you'll crush the lines.
This is another reason that you need to know where that that is if you have a septic tank. Anyways, go ahead, Larry. I'm sorry.
Well, yeah. So and thanks for bringing that up, John, because you're absolutely right. And if you do have a septic tank, it's helpful to know where your leach lines are. Now, generally your leach lines are off of your septic tank, and they're usually in a fan type pattern. And just ask a septic guy; they'll tell you. But it's not rocket science. It's not very good. Now, in my case, I actually have a pump. It pumps up the hill. It's a little bit of a different issue, but it's still I know where my leach field is too. And for all those reasons, John, because you're right, you don't want to park on them. You don't want to have too much traffic going over them, too much heavy traffic, equipment, vehicles, things like that. So it's just really helpful to know where that stuff is. We already talked a little bit about it, but understand where your electric service comes into the house. How do you find that out? You do what's called call dig. It's 811, and they'll come out and they'll mark where it is. Now, you only need to really do it once, and then you need to make notes. I always tell people, put this in a folder so that you have it at your house, so you know where all this stuff is. But you want to know. Why do you want to know? Well, John, can I ask you a question? If you took the shovel and landed it through the the main electric lines, what's going to happen?
That ends in a bad day.
How bad?
You might not see tomorrow.
Yeah, probably not.
So, yeah, that ends in a bad day. So those things I know are really buried deep to stop a lot of that. But you need to understand. And I remember when they came out and they did mark my lawn for something, and I remember that, and I actually took pictures. I have pictures of that.
Yep.
Where the lawn is all marked, so I know where the electrical comes up into my yard and over. But you got to be really careful now. And I will say that, let's say that you don't know where that is. And you go out there and you want to plant a tree. Okay. That's why, folks, you need to know where all this underground stuff is.
Yeah.
It's not as easy as you just walk outside and say, oh boy, a tree would look really good there. Yeah, not so much.
Well, and again, back on my septic clean out, the reason my septic tank backed up, because we ended up digging the lid off the septic tank, is because there was root infiltration into the actual, it's a long story, but to the joint of the pipe coming out of the house going into the septic tank had a little space between it, and roots are insidious things, and so they get in there and it created this root ball. It looks like like a net. It looks like a net almost. And we cleaned it out, understanding, folks, just to give you perspective, it's 25 years since that thing was put in, but in 25 years, it actually created a filter that clogged. I mean, all the toilet paper and stuff clogged it up, and that's what caused the clog. But we cut that roots out, and we now know we're good for another 25 years. It's not going to happen again for a long, long, long time. And now I know exactly where to dig and all that kind of stuff. I knew where to dig anyway. It's a long story, but I just didn't do it because I said, you know what, if they've got a backhoe and stuff, and here in Georgia, folks, digging in this clay that's around here is like, forget it. I'm getting a piece of equipment. Anyway, that's a personal choice that we do. But you need to know where that, you need to know where your electric service comes in, because, and we already talked about cable. I've cut cable for customers of mine because I'm digging in the landscape beds, and cable TV for one. John, how deep do they put those cable lines?
Those cables are not very deep.
No, they're like a shovel depth in.
Yeah, those are not very deep, because basically if you hit those, you're going to lose your cable. You're not going to lose your life. So that's why a lot of the these your regular electrical lines are really set down in there.
Deep.
However, they should be. However, do you know if you're trying to build a fence and somebody's out there with a backhoe and they're and drilling and stuff like that for a fence post? Oh boy, you need to have that all marked up. And I will tell you that there's other things that are running around under the ground that you don't know. A lot of if you have let's say you have a swimming pool,
there's plumbing.
There's plumbing under there.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of other things. Your sprinkler system.
Yep.
I mean, folks, there's a lot of complexities that are running around underneath there, and I'll tell you, one of the things that they do with gas pipes and stuff like that, is when the guy put the gas pipe in, they run a wire next to the gas pipe, and so on my gas meter, there's a wire that's coming up right next to it, and it's wrapped around the meter on the thing, and the guy says, now don't. He points at me and goes, now don't cut that wire. And I said, what's that wire for? And he said, because they can find that gas pipe real easy. They just put a tone on that wire, like you and I did with like a fox and a hound.
Yep.
And that's, it's a tone generator, and then you can follow it, that tone down by sweeping, like a metal detector. And find the whole thing.
And find the gas line.
So
thanks for bringing that one up too, John, because I forgot about that one. You've got to know, if you have gas, you got to know where your gas line is, because that that can be a very explosive situation. I'm not making jokes. It's serious. It can be.
And I saw it actually happen. It's on the news. You can probably look it up on YouTube. Down the street when the guys were putting in a new telephone pole and they hit that thing and sparked it with an auger.
Yep.
It
looked like a blowtorch for a long time.
It roasted a guy in the basket above it.
Yeah, which is, we don't want to talk about that.
Anyways.
So know those things. So one of the other things that you need to know too is, when you're looking at your plat or your legal description of your home, do you have any easements on your property? Now, I'm going to tell my story. So when we bought this home that we live in, we had an easement. It's a driveway easement for our two neighbors that live next to us. And so, long story short, one of our neighbors was being disrespectful, and I'm just going to leave it at that. He was being disrespectful, and we got into looking at the legal description on this easement. Long story short, we canceled the easement for him because if you're going to be, and when I say disrespectful, folks, I mean seriously disrespectful. So we said, we're done with you. We are now in a lawsuit over this easement rights. And I'll let you know in the future shows, because we're really right in the middle of it right now. And I'll let you know how it goes. But we blocked his access to his easement, meaning he couldn't drive into his property with his car, because, this is action and reaction. Okay. So, if you're going to disrespect me, I'm going to disrespect you. And so we put a gate up and limited his access. And anyway, long story short, he contacted the attorneys, and we're in the middle of this suit right now. But if you have an easement across your property, and many times, folks, there's easements that you don't know about. So there's power line easements, there's water easements, there's all kinds of easements that can be running across your property, and they are supposed to be noted on your plat if they are legal. Now, for example, I'm going to give an example of like a water easement. If there's a water main line, a water line main that runs across your property, it'll be noted on the plat. And the significance of that is that you could wake up one day and have a crew out there digging up the line, and you're like, what are you doing on my property digging? And they're going to go, we've got the easement to the water line. And guess what? You're SOL, because you are at that point. and so that's one of the reasons why you need to understand if there's any easements on your property. And in my case, this is called an easement of convenience, blah, blah, blah. Hopefully the judge is going to determine, but according to what we have, it's actually not a legal description of what of the easement. So therefore he's got a tough time of making a case for it. But you need to understand that. You need to understand if there's any easements. And almost every home has some sort of easements. Usually there's an easement that comes off the road, John. And how far is it? It's usually like 12 feet off the road or something like that.
Yeah, there is.
Depends per municipality.
Right. And that's all for water, electric, and all
water.
That.
Yeah, all the utilities.
All utilities have to have that access.
That they have access to.
I was out there one time funny you mentioned that, because I was looking outside one time, and the guy he was up a little bit from my mailbox, and there's a crew. I mean, they had a great big hole in the ground.
Yep.
Putting in all kinds of new stuff, and I'm like, okay, I understand that, but it's, you look out there, it's like, hey, there's a whole bunch of guys, and part of my front lawn's gone.
Right. But what are they doing digging up my lawn?
Yeah,
kind of thing.
Anyways, so these control entities as well. What's that?
So I wrote up some notes. So I'm calling them control entities. I originally started off with municipalities, but then one came up in my mind that was like, well, this really isn't a municipality per se. But folks, you have to understand who's in charge of your property, right? So I hate to say it, but government is in charge of your property to a degree, right? There are federal statutes about property ownership of things that you might, and these are mights, but you might have to understand, right? So if you have any kind of wetlands on your property, or now my property we live on a lake, we're up against a Corps of Engineers property. So our neighbors is technically the lake, and it's owned by the Corps of Engineers. So our property falls under part of their statutes as far as what we can do, as far as in determination of what we can do on the border of the property and what we can do on their property. It's considered public land, but you can't just run amok because it's public land, right? So you just have to have an understanding of what's going on there. If you have any kind of watershed, like any streams or anything like that, even drainage ditches, you got to be kind of careful because it falls under the federal jurisdiction, and it just can get messy. Don't worry about it unless you have those kinds of features. But you need to understand, do you have those kinds of features is one thing. Same thing with the state. The state has some jurisdiction over your property. And so you need to now, and again, usually it's in specialized cases. It's like forever wild type situations. Usually has to do with some sort of tax exemption or something like that. But you'll kind of know about it if you have it. Most people do, and you can actually designate your properties and things like that. But you need to have an idea of what's going on.
Yeah.
Now we get. Go ahead, John.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to say, now we kind of get into the nitty gritty. I'm going to say the people that control your property life a little more, and that's your state, your state and your city. Your county and your city, right? So your home is probably in a county, and the county has a lot of, I don't want to say control, but they can influence what happens on your property to a large degree.
Let's kind of sum here is that, we're, the takeaways here, is to keep you, aware of these things. So that you can get yourself in, number one, what Larry's talking about here is lawsuits, awful positions with neighbors, those things. I know that, for instance, can you cut down trees without having their permission?
Right. Yep.
It goes down to things like that.
Yep.
And the other thing, that we've been talking about here is to be safe.
Right.
We're talking about knowing where your electrical is, where your gas is.
Yep.
And then other things like don't do anything stupid, like, cut your cable if you can help it.
Yeah. Or your sprinkler system.
Or your sprinkler system, and that whole thing, keep you out of, spending a whole lot of money and having a lot of aggravation with no internet or no TV, or,
whatever.
Having the irrigation company come out again and repair lines and sprinkler heads and all kinds of things. So, that's what I'm taking, that's when I look back on all this conversation, that's what I'm taking away from this, is that, hey, it's good to know what we're talking about here.
Yep.
So you keep yourself save yourself the time, money, and aggravation.
Yeah, it's time, and mostly it's aggravation. Most of these things. Now, safety issues on a couple of these are big safety issues, and then property protection issues. But you have to understand who has the controls over your property. This is just where we were going with this one, because there's code enforcement, and we talked about just simple things like, I want to drop a shed on my property. I need a permit to drop a shed on my property. Yep. I have to abide by the setbacks off the property line. It can be only of a certain size and so forth and so on. That's all determined by the county in my case. I don't live in a city, so I don't have to worry about that. But cities also have those controls. And then, Johnny, there's the big one. This is where I had to change the description and when I went to control entities about this. HOAs, right? Mm-hmm. And folks, if at least here in the greater Atlanta area, there's homeowners associations
everywhere. They're everywhere. They're everywhere, and I'm lucky. I've got a good one. I know a lot of people are at odds with their HOAs.
I have had nightmare experiences with HOAs and had great experiences.
Yeah, so you just have to, obviously everybody's aware of it because you're paying dues, and if you don't, you're going to lien on your house.
Then you get your house gets liened, and your nosy neighbors come in and they want to control your life. And at least that was one of my experiences.
Give a guy a badge, Larry.
Oh, exactly.
So, anyways,
yeah.
Anything else? Anything else?
No, those were kind of the big things. We really wanted to touch on a couple of points, mostly safety, property protection, and then just aggravation issues, kind of those aggravation issues, like knowing your rules and regulations that abide by your home. That's an aggravation issue and plus they can get very, very expensive as well. Yeah. If you've got to get an attorney involved, it gets ugly quick. And expensive quick. Yep. So we just want you to be aware of that stuff. It just is what it is. It is what it is. All of these things play, but it's really important that you do know where a lot of this stuff is. Because as we say, if you've got, I don't know, anything, you cut your cable, all of a sudden you're like, oh man,
Well,
of course your wife's probably right in the middle of a Zoom call with her boss. Right. Click. Oops. Right. Sorry, babe.
Right. Well, Larry, anything else?
Yeah, Johnny, I was thinking about this the other day. So you were out there, you were doing some digging in your yard, and you cut the cable. And the next thing I know, the spaceship lands and they zapped you up. Instead of taking you through the cable line, they zapped you up. But I saw that beam come down.
I don't know. It turned off. I think I cut that cable. Oh, Larry.
All right. Anyway, enough of this nonsense. Folks, if you enjoy the Handyman Pros radio show, please share the word, spread the word. I hope we're bringing you some value. It is our goal, as we say, it's to help save you time, money, and aggravation, because there's a lot of things that we've done a lot of stuff and it's just aggravation. There's just things that we do that hopefully we're giving you great information. Anyway, if you have a question, send us an email, questions@handymanprosradioshow.com, or you can send it to handymanprosradioshow@gmail.com. Either one, we will respond, and we do respond. We have a newsletter that's at Handyman Pros Radio Show. Sign up. We would love to hear from you. And our Facebook group as well is at Handyman Pros. So we're getting lots of good people. John, anything else?
Nope. That's it. Really appreciate everybody's participation in this and our groups. So
and we'll
thank you very much.
See you next week on the Handyman Pros Radio Show.